Hello and welcome to my first Procreate brush review. I have wanted to have like brush reviews to look at when I'm shopping for brushes for Procreate, and I usually can find a video from the maker, which is fabulous, but I sometimes want to see the brushes used in different styles and just kind of played with. So I'm starting a new series called Procreate Brush Reviews where I'm going to just review different brush packs that I have already purchased. So I'm really excited to be starting this and sharing it with you. For day one, we're going to do a pretty large brush pack, and then hopefully weekly or every other week I will add a new one for a bit. And I'm really excited. If you guys have any requests, feel free to let me know, and I will definitely try to add them to my list of possible reviews in the future. But I think that's it, so let's get right into the video. Okay, so for the first brush review thus far, we are going to be reviewing this box. This is called the Drawing Box for Procreate Brushes by Sadie Lew, and it is $10 in the Design Cuts website, and it looks amazing. It says 30 custom brushes, and I actually purchased this last August and have been using it basically daily since. I absolutely love it. It's compatible with Procreate 4 Plus, and it comes with all of these brushes listed here. So we've got 6 charcoal brushes, a pencil brush, 2 Prismacolor pencils, 9 colored pencils, 1 oil pastel, 2 crowns, and 2 markers. And it's pretty amazing. Here are like the little swatches of it. Looks fabulous, and I like just like how real those look, and the paper that they're showing the examples on are not like super textured, so I feel like that's pretty accurate to what we are gonna get. So I'm really excited about these. At this point, I actually have already used them, so I'm trying to like play both sides of here. It also comes with a ballpoint pen, which is actually what makes it the 30 custom brushes, where apparently that was added in 2019 to the set. And just like these pictures are just amazing. I can't imagine being that good. That would be amazing. Like, look at that meat. It's just like amazing. So we're gonna be trying out this brush set today. Like I said, it has like my go-to pencil actually, and that's what we're gonna be doing. So I already have this downloaded, so I'm actually just going to re-download them to my iPad. That way we have like a fresh set. So if you are not familiar or you've never like downloaded a brush set before, it's actually super easy. So I purchased these from being logged into Design Cuts on my computer, which means I would just go to my Design Cuts account, go to my downloads, and then from there I will download the files, which then I just airdrop to my iPad because it's super easy to do. Doesn't take that long to download either. But if you are only working on your iPad, you can download it from your Design Cuts account here, and then you can actually go to your Files app, like right here, and then you could just tap it and it would open up into Procreate. But since I just tend to do it on my computer, I'm just going to airdrop it from my computer, which makes it super easy. We're going to do that right this minute. We don't need this open anymore. Airdrop. And it's going to come up and ask me if I want to cancel or open it with Procreate. So I press Procreate, and it is open, and we are now in Procreate ready to go. So in case you're wondering, I am just going to do all the samples on a default screen size canvas, and I'm working on the iPad Pro 12.9-inch screen. So the default size is this 2732 by 2048. So that is what we are working on here. Color-wise, I always do all of my sketching in like this navy blue here. So we're actually going to go ahead and use that for everything today. But like I said, here is the drawing box. It is downloaded. Whenever you download a full brush set to your iPad and to Procreate, it always goes to the top of your brush library. Whereas if you have just like downloaded like one singular brush, it'll go to the very bottom into an imported section, just in case you're wondering, or maybe you are new. So the first brush here we have is charcoal. I'm gonna go ahead and leave the settings over here as the same thing for everything. That way it's just default. Like if you were to purchase this pack, that is how it would come. So we're gonna go in with this charcoal brush here first and just kind of start swatching them. This one is like very textured and it's really nice. As you guys can see, you get a really good shading like feel. When I go slanted here, you get like this really great texture. I like to use this a lot for like shading and actually like adding texture to like ground surfaces. Since I do a lot of beachy illustrations and scenes, I have obviously sand, and I like this for like a side texture just to add a little something to it. And that one is really good. Whenever you go back over it, it does not really change anything. It just creates, you know, it fills in the spots that weren't there. You're not getting like a waxy charcoal line, or I guess charcoal isn't waxy. I don't know why I said that. There's another brush set that I've been using lately that you actually do pick up like different lines in this section. So just to note, this set does not do that. And that is a charcoal brush. If I were to write with it, not the best one for writing. Also, I'm not like a letterer in any shape or way or form, but not the best one for writing. Obviously, if you were to turn this down over here, you might be able to get a decent way to letter with this one, but I don't know. You don't have much further to go down. Now, pressure-wise, let's start super light and it slowly increase pressure. This is definitely a pressure-sensitive brush. So you can, you know, kind of like do quick sketches if you wanted, but then also like quickly make things darker. So that's a really, really nice brush. And like I said, I like to use that for like adding texture to things and kind of use it at a slanted point of view. If you guys look over at the side of this video, you can see like how I'm holding my pencil. So you can just like kind of get the idea of how, in what ways the brush behaves. Next up we have is compressed charcoal. And this one, again, is one that I like for adding texture. I actually like this as like a stucco-like brush when I'm drawing buildings, and I want the building to have a little bit more texture like you would see on a stucco building. I feel like this is really good. This one defaults to a pretty big, large size, and I feel like that's what it's really good at. I like using it at this like medium pressure point, I guess, kind of like you would on paper. I'm not pressing hard by any means, and it just kind of gives you that texture. Obviously, if you go harder, then it does fill in completely, but gives you nice little scattered edges. And I did that one like super big, and we're trying to do a lot on here, so I'm going to shrink that one down a bit. As for writing, this one I would definitely not say this is like a calligraphy one, not by any means. Next up we have fine charcoal, which by the looks of the brush here, I feel like we might get some fine lines, and if you are looking for like a lettering pencil or something, you might be able to use this one. I don't know. Again, like I said, I'm not a lettering, I do a lot of illustration based things. So this one is interesting. When I like start heavy and then go super, I didn't do it, super light at the end, it does get this like cone shape. So depending on like your pressure curve and your streamline and everything, you might be able to do some lettering with this one if you turn it down in size. So if I'm just like coloring it in, it does kind of create an overlap in places where it's darker. But of course, if I go over it, it just kind of fills it all in. This one is a really, really good textured brush as well. I feel like I'm just going to be repeating that through this whole set, because I feel like this brush set is actually super accurate to what you would get when using these in like real life. I should say on paper. This is real life. You know what I mean. It's just really, really nice. Again, if I go on the side, it actually gets really big. So let me go back here. If I go on the side, you can see all that good grain in there. That one's really, really good. Again, that would be a really nice one for adding like texture on a building, or you just want to really add like some dense shading, but a textured shading. I definitely like the textured shading sort of trend, and I feel like this would be a really good one for that, because like you said, you get that variation when you tilt your pencil and go super light or super hard. Actually, if I tilt and go hard, that's what happens, and it becomes more concentrated in the middle and feathers out towards the sides. Lots of options with that pencil. Next up is messy charcoal. I use this one on a fairly regular basis as well. Again, I use this one actually like in the sky for like clouds and changing up the sky, like color variations, because whenever you see a sky in an illustration, I always kind of like want to do one color, but that never looks quite right. So I kind of use this and go in and change the color variations, because as you can see, I can go super light and get a really nice texture. But if I go a little bit harder, I can get it a little bit darker. And again, if I go over everything, it just continues to fill it in. There's no overlap of color or like grains or anything. And this one is pretty small by default, so I'm not sure that you'd be able to go much smaller, that you would get much benefit from doing that. Next up is fat charcoal, I think. Yes, fat charcoal. And this one is about in the middle for the size, and this has a square edge, which I really, really like, because a lot of these brushes actually, like I said, have those like pointed edges here. This actually has like a flat. So if I were to go like that, like you can see the shape of my brush because I have that feature turned on. And it's kind of nice because you can go like along a wall, create some nice shading, some shadows. And if I turn this one down, you might be able to get away with some interesting lettering. If you can like watch this, like the strokes, it also like kind of reminds you of like a brush, the way that it strokes things. And I really like that. This one's, again, a really, really good one for adding texture. Then we have the flat side charcoal. I like this one a lot. I was using it a ton the other day actually for shadowing. So I was drawing a building illustration, and I was kind of like using this like behind the door rims. That way I could like create a contrast on like a multiply blend mode and get some neat texture. But this, again, it has that square end, which I really like. If I do like full pressure, as you guys can see, the middle color is basically filled in. There's a few specks that aren't, and then the edges have a nice little textured edge, and it's just a really good one. It reminds you of like a paint roller. Then we have the 6B V1 pencil. This is my go-to pencil for basically everything. For the longest time, I was only using this as a sketching brush, but recently I've also been using it like in my final illustrations because it just has such a nice texture. You can write with this one if you like. It has it pretty small, so I'm going to show it to you the way that it comes. I can never letter anything, but it just has such a good texture. It's not super pressure sensitive, which I actually like because I don't like to put a ton of pressure. But obviously you can see here I'm doing it super light, but if I go harder, it does get a bit darker. But that's what makes it good for sketching, I think, because if you were, like quickly sketching like a circle or something, but then you want to like indicate that there's shading, you can kind of just go harder or something and make it a bit more, I don't know. It just really works well for shading. Go ahead and erase that really bad example. If you make this bigger as well, you can see here, it just like, it reacts so nicely. Its default streamline, where's the settings here, is down to 1%. And honestly, that's perfect. Like, I don't think it needs any alterations at all. I love this brush because it gives such a nice texture. And like I said, you can get pretty big and like color in an area, but still not lose the texture that this brush gives you, which I really, really like. Next up is the 6B Pencil V2. And this one, as you guys can see, something changed here. Down here, the opacity is down really low. And this one is really nice as well. I don't know why, but for some reason, I don't love this one as much as I love the 6B pencil with the V1. I'm not sure why that is, and I feel like maybe I will someday like this one just as much, but I'm not even sure I can 100% tell a major difference. But I definitely like this one. I just don't tend to use it that much, but now I'm playing with it here for you guys, and I'm thinking, yeah, I need to use this in more of my illustrations. I guess the harder you do it, actually, it doesn't have as much of that grainy texture. Which one is that? The 6B Pencil V1, the one right here, has a bit more of a smaller texture than this one, where this one I feel like is a bit more bigger grained, if that makes any sense, and I think I prefer the smaller grain in my illustrations, and that's probably why that I default to that one. But again, this one actually might be a decent one to use in lettering. Maybe not. Like I said, I am not a letterist by any means, but it's not terrible for lettering. I definitely think there's something a little different. The funny thing though, this one, its opacity is really, really far down, whereas this one was all the way up, and it obviously, I don't know. There's a difference there. I'm not sure what 100% the difference is, but I like both of them, so that's good. Now we're going to go on to the 6B side pencil V1. So this is like if you were coloring with your pencil and you were, going with the side of your pencil, but this case you don't have to do it with the side. You can just do it straight up and down like you would your Apple Pencil. So you see that? Now if I do go to the side, it just becomes super light, which again, really good for shading, but it does take up a lot of space. And if I do this, it kind of has a fan-like feel to it. And that is what that one looks like. Actually probably be really good for like creating dimension on a cone shape. Then we've got the side pencil for the V2. So I'm guessing it's going to be the same thing. I think your main difference between those two pencils is that the grain on the V1 is smaller than the grain on V2. V2 seems to have a bigger grain, and I think that is the main difference here. Yeah, I would definitely say that's the main difference now. So that is all of the 6B pencils from me. So these are all the 6B pencils. That's what it is, yeah. That is the 6B category. We've got your side views here. These are your side view. My handwriting is so ugly. And those are just like your regular tip. So those are definitely some of my go-to brushes. Like I said, the 6B V1 I use for every sketch that I do. I absolutely love that. And I've now recently started integrating that one into my regular illustrations, like in the final drafts. So big fan. And totally worth it just for that pencil, actually. The HB pencil V1. This is definitely a more fine pencil. It's a bit lighter. Now, I really have to press hard if I want to get it dark, which I tend to like not enjoy pressing hard on my iPad just because it like hurts my hand. So if you wanted that one to be a bit easier, you could change your pressure curve. But this one is definitely kind of like by default, it's pretty light. We are working at a smaller size over here, whereas the opacity is all the way up, so the lightness you can't really change. Let's go ahead and increase the size a little bit and see what happens underneath it. Yeah, it just becomes wider and a bit, it's kind of like grainy all the way through. I would say where you tap your pencil, it is a little bit darker on the left side of the stroke, and the right side is lighter, but that's the only real difference, I would say. Next up we have the HB pencil V2. This one is very similar to the first one, but I would say this is darker at my light pressure. And again, I feel like the same difference that we saw over here is that this one has a bigger grain. Yeah, I would say so. And if we color in like a little square, whenever you do go over the same spot again, it just fills it in. There's no like overlap or movement of the texture or anything. Next up, we're going to go in with our toothy pencil. We've got a little bit over half the size, and the opacity is turned down on this one by default. This one is super textured. Okay, this texture reminds me of like a composition notebook front. And I can't say I've used this one a ton, but I feel like now that I'm revisiting it, I probably should. I feel like this would be great for adding shading or adding texture to ground surfaces, be it concrete, sand, something like that. The more that I go over it, it doesn't like automatically fill it in. You just get a smaller grain, I would say. So that's nice. I like that. that does have a pointed end here. You can see. So you might be able to do some lettering with that one. Next up, we have the Waxy Prismacolor, and I love that there is the Prismacolor in here because I feel like sometimes you want that pencil-y feel that you would get with a Prismacolor, but you can't necessarily always find that on digital forms. But here you can, and not only that, but like you can change it to any color that you want. You don't have to go out and buy each individual pencil or a pencil set. You can buy it once and you have all the colors. Okay, so that, oh, look at that. Okay, I don't know if you guys can see, but you can literally see like the waxy pigments like moving as you move it around. The more that I go over it, as you can see, it does fill it in, but if I start off of the white, it actually pulls in some of the white and kind of moves the, what would be the waxy Prismacolor pigment around, which is really kind of cool. It definitely has that waxy appeal. This, it has a little bit of a pointed end, which you would kind of get with a sharpened pencil, which is cool, but of course you can fill it all in. And I would say that my pressure doesn't really matter, it doesn't seem. But I definitely love the texture of that. I will be reviewing I will be reviewing more brush sets that actually have some other pencils that are similar to this one. So someday we might have to do like a comparison video too, because this is kind of fun. But that is the Waxy Prismacolor. And for it trying to be a Waxy Prismacolor, I feel like that's really good. Definitely in a digital form, because sometimes you can't get that waxy-like look, yet somehow they did. Also, I just realized I forgot to do a side view. The side view basically is the same, it's just a little bit bigger. Next up is we have the Waxy Prismacolor Sharp, because we all know that a sharp pencil behaves differently than a dull pencil. And this one doesn't feel as waxy as that one. It definitely feels like, you know, it's a sharpened version, which makes sense for its name. And if I do go harder a little bit, you have more texture within it. As you can see, it's almost like you were picking up like the grain of the paper that you were coloring on or illustrating on. But when I do go that side view, you get more of that like waxy mixing whenever the lines go next to each other. So I think that's pretty cool. And again, makes it pretty accurate to what it would be if it were a real Prismacolor. Next up, we have your traditional colored pencil. This one, that is like a sharp colored pencil, I would say. I mean, there's one down here that says it's going to be sharp, but this feels like a sharp colored pencil. You get that really nice texture. You can go in and you can see it's over so slight, but it's really, really nice. If I go over, it does kind of like fill it in, I would say, rather than keep any of the texture, which I guess would be pretty accurate to your colored pencil if you're working on a smooth piece of paper, like printer paper or something like that. Now, side, it definitely has a bigger texture. You can really see the texture contrast in there, which does remind you if you were like working on paper and it was picking up the paper grain. So that's pretty sweet. Now we have the colored pencil fine. I'm running out of room. We might need to shift over. We'll shift over. That has a really nice like rounded tip, I feel like. And it doesn't leave a ton of texture, but whenever you do like this aspect, you can kind of see it overlapping in this section. So that's kind of neat. If I go from a side point of view, it basically stays the same. So I kind of, well, there, if I go super slanted, if you guys look on the side, you can see how slanted my hand is. That definitely picks up a lot of texture. So that is interesting. And that is the colored pencil fine. Next up, we have colored pencil soft. So I kind of feel like this could be similar to the Waxy Prismacolor, because when I think of soft colored pencils, I do kind of think waxy, but there are also oil-based ones. So I'm not sure I've used a ton of oil-based ones to know a major difference. Okay, so that does remind me of the Waxy Prismacolor, but I would say this one has a bit more of a texture than the Waxy Prismacolor. So it's like a cross between the waxy and the traditional colored pencil. I like that. If I go from a side view, it just gets bigger and a bit denser, I would say. That is what that looks like. Then we're gonna go with the colored pencil soft fine. So this one should be just a finer version of the last one that we just did. Oh yes, I would say it's finer in the pretense of the texture size. So this one's texture side is definitely softer and finer, whereas that one was a bit more chunky. And if I go like that, that creates some really nice texture in there. If I go over it again, it does fill it in completely. And if I go from a side point of view, it kind of just does the same thing. And it like completely fills in. So it has a nice soft round tip too, I would say. If I just do a line, it's definitely rounded on the sides. Next up, we have the colored pencil Sharp. And that one is very much like the colored pencil Soft. It just, I would say, has a higher contrast. Whereas like in here, I don't know if I can do that with this pencil and point. But if you look in this area, you can see like there's a bigger white versus blue contrast. Whereas over here, it was definitely closer together. There wasn't as much of a white peeping through. Whereas over here, there definitely is. If I go super hard, I can get it fully filled in. When I go over a filled in area, it does just continue to fill it in. And if I go from a side point of view, you just get this really big texture. Actually reminds me of like a sweater or something. So that's kind of fun. Next up, we have the colored pencil Sharp Fine. Do that one next to it. Again, that's kind of like the same difference between the soft fine versus soft. This is just the colored pencil Sharp versus Sharp Fine, where it's just the same texture and just it's closer together, not as bulky as this one over here. So I really like that. If I do go over it again, it doesn't fill it completely in right away. You actually get a little bit of like overlap, and you continue to keep your texture until you go over it like 3 or 4 times and really rather hard. So that's kind of nice because you can go over it again and you can still kind of create some texture in your piece. Next up, we have the colored pencil Grainy, which, I mean, I feel like this one's going to be pretty self-explanatory. Also, I feel like I'm running out of room, so I'm actually going to grab some of these and move them up a little bit. That way we don't run out of room. Okay, back to the colored pencil Grainy. Ooh, this one's a big one. So that's going to be good for like coloring a big surface or a big area. And I like that it keeps its texture. When I do go over it, it loses some of its texture, which I mean is expected. But if you are like continuing a piece and you overlap a little bit, it's not going to be like, whoa, you picked up your pencil or you started with something different and really changed how it looked. It did not do that, which is nice. And sidewise, it stays about the same. Yeah, it stays about the same sidewise. So that was also really big for the size that we are on over here. It was probably about at 40 approximately, and it's pretty big. So since that was much bigger than I was expecting, I'm gonna shrink that. Next up, we have a colored pencil Texture, and this is just like a big ol' brush of the colored pencil texture. So you could like color in an area much faster than you would if you were using one of the other shapes that we did up here, which is nice for quick coloring. And it has a very, very soft edge, I would say. There's definitely no hard ending or hard edge there. So you can kind of blend it out. Also, keep in mind with all these brush sets, I didn't mention this earlier, you can always turn your blending brush onto the same brush that you are using, so you can keep that kind of cohesive through your whole piece. Also, same with the eraser. You can erase with any of the same brushes. If you hold down your eraser while you have your brush selected, it'll switch to the one you are currently using. That way, you definitely don't have to worry about hard, fine lines and such. Next up, we have the colored pencil Fine Texture. This one is definitely smaller, but of course you could increase it. I feel like the more and harder that I press, it gets darker, and if I overlap it, it definitely gets darker. This would actually be a pretty good sketching brush, but I will say it's definitely pressure sensitive in the fact that I have to press pretty hard to get a lot of color, but that does feel very accurate to colored pencils, because I was recently doing a coloring challenge, and whenever I was doing it, I found myself pressing on the paper or the pencil pretty hard, so this feels very accurate. Actually, I don't like that part of colored pencils, so I feel like I would want to change that setting on this one, because if I did a ton, I think my hand would hurt. But there is that. Really nice texture. Then we have the oil pastel. So these last so many ones are a little bit different. So I'm actually going to go ahead and add a new layer, turn that one off, and play with some of these, because like I said, these are going to have a little bit of a different texture. I have stuff on my screen. The oil pastel is the first one. Its size is at 13 and the opacity is at 77. So let's see what it's like. Okay. Okay, so that's interesting. When I go over it again, it does kind of change the lines within what we are going over. So let's draw or paint a square. Also, this brush does have a very rectangular tip, but we've got this. That doesn't quite look like oil pastel in my opinion. That is what this is, yeah. But if I go over it, you can see that movement. It moves the paint around that would be up here and down here. So that is really interesting. And I think if I start in the white and I pull it down, it pulls some of the white with it, or basically moves this paint here away from the white, which is rather interesting. Just for the fun of it, let's make it big and see what it's like. Okay, so that actually reminds me of a default Procreate brush. I don't remember what brush set it's in, but it does remind me of something that we might already have. It might actually be called the stucco brush, but that's going to be really good for coloring a full area in. Sidewise, we get that sort of texture, but that also does remind me of paint on a very textured canvas, so that's pretty sweet too. Next up we have the crown, which it's been a long time since I've had fun with a crown. But that does feel like a crown, one that's not sharp. You know, the one that you definitely need to turn the box over and use the sharpener on the back. It has a rather large texture, where actually at size 19, opacity is 82. So it's already pretty large for that size. I'm curious to know what it looks like big. So that's what it looks like all big and such. I definitely don't think that's how it's meant to be used. I definitely think that we go down to, it was at 19, I think. So we'll leave it at 19. Yeah, that does remind me of a crown. I don't get as much of the pickup that you normally get with a crown, but also it's been a while since I've used one. Oh, actually, maybe that was just my eyes. I felt like the more that I went over it, the lighter it got in the middle, where it kind of looks like it's darker on the edge, but I think that's honestly just me staring at it too long. Next up we have a waxy crown. Yeah, I think the waxy aspect is what I was looking for in the crown that didn't find, so let's see what it's like with the waxy crown. Ah, there we go. There's that texture. And look, when I went back over it, you can still see the original shape. That's kind of what I was expecting. I like that. That definitely feels like a real crown. So the more that I go, the more you can see the overlapping of the crown, which feels very authentic. And if I go sidewise, it basically stays the same. It just gets a bit larger. But I like how that overlaps. And you kind of get to build the color like you would with the crown. That's fun. Now we have the ballpoint pen. Okay, so these last 3 brushes in this set are ones that I've actually never used in an illustration. I've only ever just played with them, like I'm kind of doing now for this video, because they are very, very accurate to what they are. Now, ballpoint pens are probably my least favorite pen, but a permanent marker is fun, but I've never done art with a permanent marker. And a marker That's interesting. I have done some marker art. So while I haven't used this one yet, I'm just like excited to show these because they're very, very accurate. So the ballpoint pen here is set to a size 3, which is tiny, and the opacity of 41. So let's just go up here and do some scribbles. Look at dark. I did not change the color, guys. We are still on the same blue. This one totally changes the color as you would expect with a ballpoint pen. I think for the fun of it, let's go to a green and see what happens. See how saturated it makes that color? Because the green that I picked was like super, super light, but it is oh so saturated. So let's go back to, well, actually, I like how you can see this one. You know, with a ballpoint pen, the more that you're on the paper, it kind of like bleeds or blobs, and I feel like you can actually like create that with this. The harder that I go in certain areas, like basically it turns black, even though we're just using this green ballpoint pen. Definitely looks like, you know, you were bored and you were waiting for something to load on a computer and you were sat there scribbling with your ballpoint pens. I kind of love just how accurate that is, because even though I don't like ballpoint pens, the fact that it is so accurate, and I'm on an iPad right now, that's just really, really cool. So that is what the ballpoint pen looks like. Obviously, you could, you know, probably do some writing with that, and it would look very much like it would if you were in a notebook or on a random piece of paper. Next up is the permanent marker. So the permanent marker is set to approximately 25. An opacity, I think I just moved it, but it's at 42. So it was probably at 40. So let's play with the permanent marker. Whoa, super saturated. If I'm going at an angle, it picks up like the paper texture, which is cool. And as you guys can see, the more that I go over an area, or the harder that I push, the darker it is. So let's just, you know, go a circle. That's really accurate. Look at this part right here. You can't like, it's very much a rounded thing. You can't really, I don't know, you can't really change that. But look at that, how you get that layering of the color. Even though I'm just like doing a circle, the outer edges are more like what you would get with a Sharpie, because obviously where your tip touches the paper, it's going to be darker. And then the more that you go around it, the lighter it's going to be, and kind of spreads out. That's so accurate. That's just really cool. Like I said, I've not done art with a permanent marker, but I feel like if I did, that is what it would look like. I just want to like turn on green for the fun of it again. Look at that, guys. Like, that is just so accurate. Also, that was some cool, like, that looked neat. You can do some really cool stuff with that. And that is a permanent marker. Next up, we have the regular marker. And I don't know if that's meant to be like alcohol marker, a water marker. I'm not really sure. But, wow, okay, so that feels like an alcohol marker. And when I go over it again, it gets darker and darker. And they don't like ever mesh together, which is kind of cool, because that's how it would be with like a Copic marker or something like that. So that's really cool. I forgot to mention the size. The size looks like it is probably around 20-25. Opacity is all the way up. And that one is really cool. So these like last 3 that I just showed you are very, very much exactly what they say they are. They feel just like using a marker, a permanent marker, and a ballpoint pen. It's kind of crazy. And the crowns are really close. I feel like the waxy crown is the closest. And the crown kind of felt like some of the pencils, just like a chunkier version of it. And then the oil pastels felt like a larger pencil. So that is the last half, and there is your first half, and I will go ahead and like share these pictures with you guys on the screen so you can see them up close. Actually, I feel like you probably are seeing them the best right now in this little screen recording. But again, this was the Drawing Box Procreate Brushes by Sadie Lew, available in design cuts, and I will go ahead and link this down in the description box below because I absolutely love this brush set. As you guys could see, they had very accurate brushes. They looked lovely, and obviously there's some great potential with these because these like example illustrations with them, they're just amazing, and honestly I couldn't imagine, but that is the power they hold, and that would just be amazing. Also, since I kept telling you and sharing the information about how I use the 6B V1 for all of my sketching, I will go ahead and kind of like show you a sketch that I've done with that. So this piece here was definitely done with that pencil. I'll go ahead and turn that up all the way. But you know, it's good for a quick sketch. You can get like your side shading, you can kind of indicate where you want your shadows to be, and you can also like go super big and go super fine and put in your details. And that's obviously with 2 different phases of sketches here. Not all of my sketches are that sloppy, but let's be real, they probably are. That probably also wasn't the best one to share. I feel like the 6BV one just allows you to really sketch like you would if you were in your bullet journal, sketchbook, anything. It just feels very accurate. And then I've also, like I said, recently been using it for full on like coloring and illustrations. I actually used some of those in this beach blanket here. So a lot of potential with this brush pack. I absolutely love it again. And I can't wait to hear what you guys thought of these brushes. Do you have them? Do you have a favorite brush set already that you love? If you do, please let me know, and I would definitely like to try out more brush sets. This one is available now in design cuts. It is only $10, and I will link it down below, and I think that is it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will talk to y'all very soon. Bye!